All right, everybody, it's 6 o'clock on the Pacific West Coast. My name is Brent Jordan. I am the owner of OsteoStrong Mercer Island, and I want to welcome you to a worldwide event. We are live streaming this tonight throughout the entire world. We're all the way into Australia, all of the United States. Pretty exciting event for us to be able to host here. We are super lucky to have Dr. John Jaquish, PhD, with us tonight to answer some questions. We're going to have this in an interview format, and hopefully we'll be able to take some questions from the audience. I don't need to introduce John. Everybody knows who he is. He's got a great story to tell us tonight. For those of you who don't know, you're in for a treat. He invented the system that we use called Spectrum, and you'll learn more about it as we move forward. We also have Ebel down at the other end. Herb is the regional developer for the mountain states, the Northwest mountain states, so kind of between here and Minnesota. And he's responsible for helping people start franchises. So he's the guy to talk to about that. So we're delivering a message tonight to both people who are interested in becoming members. We're delivering a message to people who might be interested in our mission, which is to put one of these things all over the world. And so we're excited to have everybody here and have everybody on the video as well. So I'm going to kind of get out of the way and let Herb chat for a second, and then we'll get in with John.
Well, Brent, first of all, thanks for hosting the event here at Mercer Island. We're excited to be here. He's got a beautiful center. What a great audience that showed up tonight.
Hang on just a second. All right, everybody, they can't see you, so let's make a little noise here for a second. Come on, everybody.
Very good.
Just want to make sure they didn't think this was canned.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I want to give a special thanks to John for developing the technology also. It's just amazing what he did. We're going to hear more about that. But I also wanted to shout out to Kyle Jaquish, the founder and CEO of OsteoStrong, for starting the company and recognizing what John developed was so valuable in helping us work to take this worldwide, not only with the local people here, but working through Tony Robbins and his organization. And we get the opportunity to present and hold events or bring our equipment to Tony Robbins events. So kind of through that effort and Tony's support, we now have centers in Australia, Denmark, Greece, Iceland, Spain, Sweden, and the UK, and in the United States. When I joined, we had 15 franchises, and that was 2 years ago. Today we have 60 locations in the United States, and we actually have 70 that is, in the pipeline to be built just here in the US. So we're growing very rapidly. We're getting to the point that we're almost opening one center a week, and the goal of the company is actually to open one center a day. So you're going to see a lot more coming from us, getting awareness out about this and increasing the opportunity. Here, there's opportunity to put probably 20 centers in the metro area. Brent, of course, is the owner of Mercer Island. He's interested in opening in Bellevue and also in Seattle. So there's lots of ways to get involved, and it happens. One day in my own center, I had a woman come in and ask me about, if I was going to expand, how she would be involved in that. She was 80 years old. I kind of told her what the options were. The next day, she walked in without me soliciting it and handed me a check for $100,000. Okay, so it happens. Yeah, I can't disclose where it's at.
But she's opening one?
She's actually an investor in one that is open right now. So she's
never heard that story.
It's a true story, actually. Anyway, so it's pretty amazing what happens. There's lots of ways to be involved with OsteoStrong. You can be a member, you can be an owner, you can be an investor. There's international programs. So if you wanted to be the master for, give me a country, John.
Hungary.
Hungary.
There you go.
You can be the master in Hungary, and you could operate that entire country. So there's lots of opportunities with OsteoStrong. I don't want to spend too much time on the franchising side, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows you can reach out to me afterwards at herb.ebel@osteostrong.me. So that's HERB.EBEL at osteostrong.me with more questions and how you gain access to the CEO call. So you can meet Kyle Jaquish and ask him questions directly, the founder of our company. So that's a little bit about the franchise. I want to talk now just briefly about my personal experience and how I got involved in OsteoStrong. I lived here in the Northwest area for 18 years, and we had just moved back to our hometown, Rapid City, South Dakota. We were looking for an opportunity, what would be our next business venture. And I came across this business called OsteoStrong. And when I started reading about it, I learned that, it could increase your bone density very rapidly. Well, it just happened to turn out that my wife, Shelly, who is on the phone in our center in Rapid City, South Dakota, she had low bone density at the age 38. She had osteopenia from taking a drug called Ebel. And at age 51, she was getting very, very close to osteoporosis. So we said, wow, why wouldn't we want to get involved in this business? We could not only be involved in a great business, but it could pay very huge personal dividends to us, saving her from painful fractures or potentially taking drugs that could cause issues like osteoporosis. And so we decided to jump in. We got so excited after talking to my neighbor, who's a doctor, about the technology and how it would change your bone density, that we didn't only buy the rights to put a center in Rapid City, but we bought the rights to develop in 6 states. And so that's how I became a regional developer, and how I am ending up out here in Washington helping Brent and some of the other folks that are in the audience tonight that want to develop here. That's how I became engaged. So the exciting news, and I want to give a special thanks to you, John. My wife, on her birthday this year in January, received her bone scan after 2 years, her DEXA scan. And John, thank you very much. She's back to healthy bone density. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Big change for us.
Yeah, that's why I did it.
So, we have in our center now over 80 documented increases in individuals' bone density scans. So it takes a while because you get a DEXA scan about every 2 years, right? We've been open 2.5 years, and so we've got a lot of testimonials now.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the fun part, the interview with Dr. John Jaquish. John, why don't you just start with how it all got started? What got you involved in this? What got you excited about bone density?
Right. Right. So I developed this while I was in school, and what happened was my mother was diagnosed with osteoporosis. And she was informed of some of the fracture statistics. Some of the fractures, osteoporotic fractures of the head have a mortality rate that's similar to that of breast cancer. So she heard these statistics and thought, oh, it's terrible. It's going to be very limiting for my life. And she was sad. And so I heard this out of my mother. And she's kind of a hypochondriac. She's always thinks she's dying. So, but this was a real thing, unlike all the other things that she thought she had. So I thought, okay, let me read about it. Let me see if I can come up with something. So the approach I took was I want to find if there was a group of people in the world that had superhuman bone density, incredible high bone density. Like, what are they doing to do it? Like, how did they get there? And so once I started reading some of the published academic literature, it was very obvious that there was a population, and it was not obvious, but I saw how they did it, and that population was gymnasts. It's the rate at which they contact the ground. They get incredible forces through the musculoskeletal system, through this high impact stimulus. Now, they also injure the most of any other type of athlete. They typically retire at the age of 19, the average retirement age for gymnasts. So I said to my mother, I have an idea. Well, first I told her you should go out for gymnastics. I didn't think that was funny at all. So the next thing was, how about I create a series of medical devices? They're going to give you the benefit of high impact without any of the risks of injury. She probably didn't know what I was talking about, but she said, yes, shit, sounds great. So that's exactly what I did. So I built a series of prototypes, and I put her through the protocol. Within 18 months, she went from being right at the diagnosis level of osteoporosis to having just underneath the bone density of a 30-year-old. She was in her mid-70s at the time, and now she's 82. And since then, she's had a fall. We all fall. It's not like just because you're older, you're going to fall. But you think about it more when you're older because you know the likelihood of fracture is higher and the likelihood of recovery from that fracture is low. So she fell down some concrete stairs and landed on one knee. And they took her to the emergency room, and swelling that her knee was larger than a basketball. That's like right out of the surgeon's mouth. And so they were sure that there were multiple fractures just from all the swelling. So they did an x-ray and put her, had her laid up, and they came back to the x-ray and they said, we don't understand how you can have that kind of hematoma on a knee and you broke nothing. And so then, of course, she was talking about this. And she's talking about OsteoStrong. And these emergency physicians had no idea what they were. I got a few interesting phone calls the next day, like, "What? Explain what you're doing again?" Because my mother did a terrible job explaining it. But the fantastic thing is she had the fall and did traction. The objective isn't, of course, to have a great DEXA scan. The objective is to get the fracture, and she did. And so there's many other stories like that. So that's how it got started. That was the reason.
That's pretty amazing. And so your mom has osteoporosis, and you just go out to your play box and decide, well, I want to build you some equipment.
It didn't happen like in an afternoon. It took some time. I had to pull together some information. Talking myself into it was very difficult because as I was doing it, I was asking physicians, what do you think of this? What do you think of my idea? And they all told me it's not. 100% of the people I spoke to told me it was.
Yeah.
So I'm a bad listener, yes.
Yeah.
I just, okay, well, I'm just not doing a good enough job of explaining why this needs to happen. Now, I was getting my MBA at the time.
Right.
And then I went and got my PhD afterward.
Yeah.
And my PhD advisor told me, you would have talked yourself out of this if you had gone to get your education in biomedical engineering first. Because it's so radically unconventional that you're taught so many things about, like, this is the way things are in traditional education, and whereas you just totally vanilla just looked for an idea and came up with one and tested it. So like that's really how innovation should happen. But
so we know it was your idea and that you got the biomedical engineering degree and that background, but you grew up with some mentor.
I
remember that
father. He designed and built the lunar rover for NASA. Smart guy.
Yeah.
Right. And he always had said things to me like, usually when everybody's going one way, you should consider going the other way. And you hear advice like that, what does that mean? Okay, whatever. But that was just one of those instances where I thought, I really think that there's a better way to approach this. And also, I want to be clear, it's not like, my mother didn't want to take the medications because she read about the side effects. But this company is not like an anti-pharma company. Like, there are pharmaceuticals that have performed very well and have very low side effects. It was really more like, I want to come up with something that is a physical medicine intervention. And what that means is using your own physiology to address the problem. And there is no ethical physician in the world that wouldn't choose physical medicine first. If your body can fix itself, that's certainly better than an option that would have a risk associated. So let's see what the options are there first. What does a cardiologist do? Tells you to exercise. If you're at cardiac risk, it's what can we do to make the cardiovascular system perform at a higher level, and we can avoid some potential incident later on by doing so. So I knew that even though doing anything that relates to health takes a long time, and boy, does it take a long time. But it's only because of data gathering and getting research done, things like that. So I knew it would work right when I had it all designed on paper.
So my wife was in her early 50s and she had great results, but your mother was
she was in her late 70s.
Early 70s, and then am I correct in saying 18 months? She was
in 18 months. Yeah,
was that?
Right. That's a little shorter than normal. I was a little harder on her than I should have been because I didn't know to what level of fatigue at that point people needed to go to.
Right.
So what happened was I did the protocol with my mother where I made her go to just absolute fatigue, joints just shivering in complete engagement. And whereas what I found out later was that it didn't take that level necessarily, but it would take longer.
Sure.
So the level of engagement that somebody is willing to go to is not as relevant as just being consistent.
Yeah.
And looking towards performing better, increasing the level of functional bone performance. So functional bone performance increases for a number of reasons. One is you're neurologically training the body to fire musculature in synchronous in these specific positions. So you're sort of training for impact absorption, but also deceleration. So that in itself neurologically is a tremendous benefit, and that happens very quickly. So as people begin to do that, there's a benefit from that, and then there's then because of the high level of force, we're having the musculature alter in its density, the density of the tendons and ligaments as well, which supports joints better, cuts joint pain. Anybody with osteoarthritis, you can cut the pain in half in a very short period of time. And then with the bone density, once you get to the minimum dose response of triggering bone growth, which I'm sure you'll ask me that question. Once you get to that minimum dose response, you're triggering growth.
So the burning question I have is, your mom ever forgiven you for that overtraining?
Oh yeah. Well, as soon as the second scan came, it was like all is forgiven.
Awesome.
Right. I pushed her real hard.
That's good. I know Brent had some questions about the science.
Well, of course, you knew that I was going to be the guy to ask about the science.
Mm-hmm.
And that's right. Another thing, which you're going to expect this one. You started to touch on that. So why did you choose to build something rather than have her go do high-intensity interval training or yoga or jumping on one leg and holding a 3-pound dumbbell?
So so there's a lot of silly protocols that try and get to putting force through the body. So when you look at the body of literature, I might screw up one of your questions that you're going to ask next. So for that, I apologize. I didn't get the questions. When you look at some of the physical medicine studies that have been published, there's more than 25,000 studies that have shown positive bone density gains with a physical medicine approach. Usually they were high impact studies. So what they might do is have like a weighted vest study where people are jumping off of benches or chairs, and there's a very high risk of joint injury. So they'll start with 1,000 test subjects, and then anybody who's ever had any sort of joint dysfunction is disqualified. Anybody who's ever taken a medication is disqualified. Anybody who's ever been overweight or is overweight in any way is disqualified. So does that give you a sample size or a sample that is a reflection of the general population? Absolutely not. But that's not the point. The point is learning something. So in these studies, scientists are trying to learn, can we grow bone density in an older population? And so that answer was yes. And so in fact, in the 25,000 studies, 67% of the cohorts in those studies were over the age of 50. So the gymnast studies are in that 25,000, and other high impact stuff, and then other strategies for loading the body are in there. The problem is all of these strategies were questionably safe, which is why they had to screen. And even now, like I was reading the summary of a protocol trial that's going on in another country, and people were getting injured left and right, and they were doing very heavy weightlifting. So I knew that what existed from a high impact standpoint, while it could be effective, it also had a lot of injury associated. And like, I'm just not going to have my mother go through that. Why? Like, what if there's a better way? And so it was the what if there's a better way that drove me to having her avoid that.
So high intensity, heavy, very, very, very heavy, strong.
Right. Well,
from an isometric standpoint, can't I just do that at the gym?
Well, so what we're doing is not isometric. It's compressive. There's movement. Isometric means no movement. When you look at the Latin roots of the word. So we're getting the body in a position where you would naturally absorb high impact force, and then taking to fatigue those positions so that you're actually getting to a force, a level of force that would be associated with maybe even higher than, because you're looking at the absolute maximums of the tissues, the tendon, the ligament, the musculature, and the bone, getting to those maximum forces and then taking them to fatigue until neural inhibition happens, and then you've had a potential growth stimulus event. So you can't really get to the maximum of anything with traditional fitness because you're lifting a static object, but you have different capability in just 1 millimeter different positions. So if I look at what I'm capable of pushing away from myself, what I'm capable of here versus here is very different. And so as a result, moving static weights didn't make sense to me at all, really. And it's been, the more I learn about that, and I even developed another product for altering muscular performance and muscular size and power. And because of what I know, and I don't know if the world's ready for that message, but I really see like lifting weights as a total waste of time and potentially damaging to the body because we're overloading joints and underloading muscle. If we're using the same weight in a weaker range of motion than we are in a stronger range of motion, well, now that we have the academic literature based on the bone loading that devices that invented, when you look at those levels of force, we now have information that indicates that we're 7 times more powerful here versus here. So why would you ever use the same force in multiple positions? That doesn't make sense. That's not how we work. So that's why I just thought, I looked at what was in traditional fitness and I said that doesn't really apply to anything that.
And I can't just make it up in quantity.
No.
Is there some sort of
awesome question? You cannot make it up in quantity. So when you look at adaptive responses, does everybody know what adaptive response means? Your body changes as a result of an environmental stress that you put on. So a suntan, a callus, those are adaptive responses. So if somebody says, oh, it's summertime's coming, obviously I've said that another time of year. At least it's not raining.
It's like summertime to me.
So yeah, yeah. So you know, someone says, I'm going to get a tan. Do you ever say, how many sets are you going to do in the sunlight? How many sets are you going to do to get a tan? That's a ridiculous question because you get a stimulus and your body responds, right? So why don't you have to do multiple? So why don't you have to run outside and run back inside and let your skin rest and run outside and run? I've never even said that to you. I knew you like that. Right, and that is monumental of how poor the stimulus is when we exercise with traditional resistance. It's absolutely profoundly monumental. Why would you have to do multiple sessions of stimulus? Because the stimulus is lousy. So, and I knew that back then, and now I know far more about it, and have developed 2 products to attenuate.
That's way better than the aspirin example.
Yeah, it is better than the
That's awesome.
I've completely lost my track now because that was such an awesome answer. And you guys, don't ever ask me why it's just 1 second. I got a new one for you.
Yeah.
That's great.
You want me to show the aspirin example?
You guys want to hear the aspirin example?
Well, so there's we know that when you stimulate a response, and there's great research on bone, like sunlight, you only need 1 stimulus. A callus, you only need 1 stimulus. Bone only needs 1 loading cycle. So they've done tests where they have people do a medium impact load. Let's say they jump from a 6-inch surface down to the floor, and they do pre and post DEXA work or do blood draws to check for bone turnover markers. And then they have a very high surface where somebody jumps off of 1 time. The high surface with the 1 loading cycle, bone adapts. In fact, you can see the turnover markers immediately after you exceed what's called the minimum dose response. And that means like everything in medicine, and whether it be physical or pharmaceutical medicine, what is the minimum amount of a stimulus or a nutritional element that you need for a change to happen? So this is what like pharmaceutical researchers are always trying to figure out what's the least amount of a chemical that's going to have the effect we want. So they don't just pick a dosage and just go, hey, how about 50? That sounds good. No one does that. So when I say like with aspirin, aspirin has a dosage associated with it. So you take aspirin for headaches. Would you take 5 milligrams or 5,000? 5 won't do anything. 5,000 will probably kill you. But 350 seems to work. And we have a lot of research to back that up. So therefore, no one's been challenging that recommendation. So a number of years ago, what was the minimum? So the question was asked, what's the minimum dose response for bone growth? And now I don't know that it was just me that got this discussion started, but I went and I presented some data at the World Congress on Osteoporosis, and I met some researchers that were looking at the data, and they saw 7, 8, 9 multiples of body weight with a postmenopausal population. That sounds terribly painful. Who would sign up for that? And I said, no, actually, it feels great. Of course, they're looking at me, and they're like, yeah, I'm sure you think it feels great. But so they saw me as kind of a crazy guy, but they were interested in the data. What I was presenting was definitely original. And so they were, and by the way, that the International Osteoporosis Foundation, really cool organization, really open to new ideas. And I know like a lot of people in medicine say, there's a lot of closed minds out there. Yeah, not those guys. Like they're the top researchers in the world, and they were just totally thrilled to hear about something new, which was very exciting. So they asked the question, so these loads seem high, and I said, well, we don't know what the minimum dose response is. We don't know what the minimum trigger for bone growth was. And so the next year, a group of researchers figured it out. What they did was they taped accelerometers on the hip joint of people of different ages. And they said, go and do high impact stuff, whatever you feel comfortable. So some of the older people, they went and did a dance class. So they went and did yoga, which I know is not high impact, but they think it is. So, or whatever, go for a walk. And then some of the younger people went and played soccer or football. And so then they looked at the accelerometer data and figured out how many multiples of body weight were absorbed through that hip joint, and then they would give them regular blood tests during this process. So they'd look at bone breakdown and bone building. Now, you have a metabolic rate of bone. You're always losing and gaining bone, and it's the ratio that counts. So it's sort of like your skin. You're always shedding your skin. That's what dust is made of, and it's horrible. So when you look at that ratio, you want more building than losing. And typically, when you're under 30, you have more building than losing bone. And then when you exceed 30 years of age, the opposite happens, and you begin to lose more than you're gaining. So what amount of force was required to trigger growth in bone? Turns out it's 4.2 multiples of body weight. Those who got one loading cycle, at least one, of over 4.2 multiples of body weight through the hip were switching that ratio. And those who did not exceed 4.2 multiples of body weight were not able to change the ratio at all. So minimum dose response, 4.2 multiples of body weight. Now, that explains why people who go to the gym and lift heavy, yeah, they're not doing that. There's the elite athletes in the world that can exceed 4.2 multiples of body weight. You could probably put them all on one school bus. So it's not a lot of people who can do that with weights.
So example, I'm sorry. So example, your upper growth trigger is a load, which is like a chest press.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to get him to take it.
He doesn't want to.
He's not going to take it. More than anybody's.
Well, I've been doing it a long time.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, you adapt and become very powerful, and you have an incredible power weight ratio. So the devices, they don't influence muscular size. So women, don't be afraid you're going to look like me and that'd be terrible. Your husbands will be even more upset than you are. But it builds a very powerful musculature, and then of course the tendons and ligaments, bone density that goes along with that. But I have my upper extremities. Well, all movements have exceeded thousands of pounds.
Well, mine's 1,600 pounds. I know you're not over that.
You really think I fall on that? Yeah. Okay. It's just under 1,000 kilos. So 2,200 pounds. I can push and make changes.
For those of you who have not seen a demonstration of the Spectrum equipment, this will all make sense to you. And the more fascinating device, I think, is actually the lower growth trigger.
Of course, that's far more important.
And I'm going to go ahead and put a plug, although we're not going to talk about this tonight. John mentioned his other invention, and that's the reason that he looks as strong as he is. I don't look as strong as I am. But
is that like a compliment?
I don't know. It doesn't seem like it is. We'll arm wrestle. But asking your center, for all of y'all, that's us, about the X3 bar, and they'll talk to you about that. So, but I do, you brought up athletics, so of course I'm going to talk about that as well. And I know that there's some of you may have seen some of the marketing around OsteoStrong for athletes. Well, a 25-year-old, 30-year-old, or even a 22-year-old Olympic hopeful, I don't have bone density issues. Why would they want to come to OsteoStrong?
That's actually not true. A lot of them do have bone density issues, especially the non-impact athletes like swimmers. They do have very low bone density. So
why is that? Tell us more.
No impact. In fact, every time you contract a muscle, you're using calcium. Every time you blink your eyes, you're using calcium. The more firing events and muscle recruitment that one has, the more you're compromising bone mass, especially if you're avoiding impact. So I was just in, where was I? In Reykjavik, I travel a lot. I don't remember where I was in Reykjavik and I was talking to some Ironman competitors who were early 50s and had very low bone density. It's super athletic. How is this possible? Well, when you start doing endurance exercise at that volume, you have a different way of running. You try and lower the amount of impact, and you're trying to activate the least amount of muscle. You're not trying to have a long stride because that's more energy. You want to conserve energy and kind of pitch your body forward. It's like a controlled fall when you run. So different biomechanics from an endurance standpoint. And what they're doing is they're having a lot of contractions, which uses a lot of calcium, and they're not having a lot of high impact, which doesn't give the body a reason to hold on it or use what's coming nutritionally. So they end up getting low bone density. So a lot of athletes don't have the bone mass that they probably previously did. Also, a lot of younger athletes, they had poor nutrition when they were, you mentioned that earlier. So they're very poor nutrition, and they're not necessarily as active. I was it was about a year ago where Kyle Zagrodsky and I were at West Point. We were talking to some of the doctors that were looking at the West Point recruits. They're 18 and they come to the academy, and they're having osteoporotic fractures. They're 18 years old, and they're, athletic relative to the rest of the 18-year-old population. But what athletic used to be and what it is today is different. And the standards in all branches of the military have, so we're told, gone down. I don't know if that's really public information, but they didn't tell me not to repeat it. So they've gone down because there's just so much deconditioning in the populations now. So I do think that a lot of these athletes have challenged bone mass.
But what about an elite athlete? What about someone who does have strong bones and maybe they're a powerlifter? Maybe they're
right.
Is there any
or
advantage or a gymnast?
Right. So normal bone mass is 0. That's what the T-score is. So like whatever your gender, whatever your race, they're different. Your T-score of 0 is what you should be at 30 years of age. It's what's called peak bone mass, and that's typical for where you're supposed to be. Now, you can build beyond peak bone mass. So, for example, I'm 2 standard deviations above normal. Gymnasts can be anywhere from 1 to 2 standard deviations above normal. So very accelerated, high bone mass density. Now, higher your bone mass, you're going to avoid fracture. You're going to be able to recruit more muscle with everything you do, because where you would have neural inhibition, where you would have discomfort, which shuts muscles off, that's like another thing in like lifting in your background. A lot of individuals try and sort of like power through the pain. They're not doing that. They're just hurting themselves. And no matter what they think they're doing, I know it's emotionally that's hard, because you've been working with so many athletes for so long, and the whole like powering through. There's a reason you have discomfort, and it's your body trying to shut you off, and it actually is shutting you off. Mm-hmm. No matter what you do, if you have that level of discomfort, it's turning muscles off, and if you keep repeating that type of activity, you're just digging yourself a hole. So we
go from acute to chronic.
Right, from acute to chronic, and now with between X3 and OsteoStrong, we can get around. Maybe getting around is not the right way to say it, but we can actually use the human body the way the human body is designed. So we put high loads on the places where we're designed to absorb high loads. And so everybody in the room, that's kind of why I don't like talking about what like my performances are, because I think that number sounds kind of scary. Right? Every female's like, sure, yeah. So it sounds kind of scary, but remember what I said. You're 7 times stronger here than you are here. So however strong you think you are currently, right now, today, at this moment, far more capable of anything than you've ever seen. You just need to get in the right position to allow for the body to fatigue in those positions. And standard exercise doesn't even come close.
So for an athlete, even like a professional athlete, because I know we're getting a lot of interest there now, I think about what could it mean to them. And my opinion is it means they could possibly perform at a higher level. Not only that, they might be able to perform longer. And does anybody know what NFL stands for? Not for long, exactly, right? So just think about what it could mean to them if they could perform for one more year.
Is that a thing? I've never heard.
Yeah. So it could be several $1 million to them if they could perform for one more year, right? Think of Tom Brady. If he could play to 50, what would that mean to him? Earl Thomas.
Well, Earl Thomas, exactly. Those of us.
Great discussion on performance and how it impacts athletes. But one of the things that was exciting to me in our center when we got going was all of a sudden people were coming in and they were saying, guess what, my A1C level went down. And I was like, that's awesome. And so talk about that, how it impacts individuals' A1C or
So
diabetes.
Metabolic disease of bone is osteoporosis. Metabolic disease of muscle is type 2 diabetes. So when you have, what's the nicest way to say this? When an individual has created a toxic level of glucose and insulin in the blood, the reception of that becomes very poor. And that's a summary of what happens with type 2 diabetes. So how do we influence the musculature to accept more insulin and glucose so that we have a more controlled, non-toxic level of insulin and glucose in the bloodstream? So there's a couple ways to do it. One is cardiovascular exercise. But the problem is you do cardiovascular exercise and then you got to do it again the next day or later that same day and again and again and again to get that benefit. So what ended up happening, and this was not the objective with the creation, that was really just focused on bone density, but what we noticed is the people who were on diabetes medication. Now, there's a strong association between type 2 diabetes and osteoporosis for obvious reasons. But these people would come in and say, I don't need insulin anymore. I've been on insulin for 20 years. What's going on? And what's happening is because of the influence on the density of the musculature, it's called myofibril change in the muscle mass, a more dense muscle. You're creating more receptor sites for insulin and glucose. So the GLUT4 signaling improves, and this has been shown in all kinds of different loading strategies and the responses in hemoglobin C levels over time. And so that was another study that was done in East London. We did the bone density study, same hospital did a type 2 diabetes study. And it was great. It was because of pre-diabetics who refused to take medication. So you can't do a study on a diabetic who refuses to take medication because that's unethical to not have them take medication. Even if they don't want to, you still can't study them. So it was a population that probably is a good reflection of the general population. They refuse medication, but they also refuse to change their diet. So, cake and pizza and no exercise. So there's a lot of people out there that are like that, unfortunately. And so this study influenced their hemoglobin A1C better than any of the other meta-analyses on monotherapies that have been published to date. So caloric restriction, metformin, and even outperform metformin. Now, a lot of these, that's a common prescribed metabolic drug, and there's very little side effect to that. But anyone with metabolic dysfunction or type 2 diabetes would most likely be told to do all of the things, because these things tend to go together very well. So caloric restriction, ketogenic nutrition is very advantageous for people with type 2 diabetes.
Intermittent fasting.
Intermittent fasting is great. Some of the things that Dr. Jason Fong has been putting out are absolutely
Great book that he published, Complete Guide to Fasting, if you want to look into that.
In the obesity code. The obesity code is actually a third.
Yeah. I need to read down on that.
Good.
Yeah.
So all these strategies, if you look at any of them independently, what had the most influence was OsteoStrong.
Absolutely.
And not only you do this and you combine it with some of the other things, and now you have a really strong strategy to approach metabolic dysfunction and type 2 diabetes.
And I would just say that in our center, we've seen several individuals lower their A1C already. So we have a lot of documented cases there. I'm going to predict that one question that usually comes up is, for me in our center, we've seen a lot of increases, but they're varying increases. And we have a particular win for an individual that was actually somebody that lost bone density, okay? But I don't want to talk about her specific health condition. But she had a health condition where she was losing maybe 8 to 10% of bone density a year. And after doing OsteoStrong for just 1 year, she reduced that to 4% of a loss. Okay? We're hoping by 2 years, once she's done it for them, we get her back to hopefully, not losing anything, either staying the same and or improving. But it is important to know that each individual is going to respond a little bit differently. And there are some reasons why that is, John. Mm-hmm. Would you mind talking about a few of those?
Yeah, multiple factors going on. There's nutritional, there's not even just what you consume, but it's how absorbable is it, and how's your body metabolizing different things. There's an expression that I really don't like, which is everybody's different. We're really not all different. We all have heart, lungs, skin, we're profoundly all the same. But over the course of one's lifetime, between some of the maybe poorly thought out things we do, like excessive alcohol consumption or tobacco, as well as maybe some of the medications that we consumed that had side effects. For example, proton pump inhibitors. You ever know that is blood pressure medication? Not blood pressure, heartburn medication. So it's very damaging to bone. But you don't really hear about that very much. And these things they're over the counter. You can buy a proton pump inhibitor medication just at the drugstore right now. And so there are people who've been on these things for an entire lifetime and just have devastating side effects in bone mass. So there's all kinds of different factors, and then some that some individuals don't know about. For example, one thing OsteoStrong is very good at, and this I did not predict, is finding thyroid dysfunction. Yeah. Because a lot of people who have a dysfunctional thyroid don't know. It's not like there's a symptom of that. There are, but they're not totally obvious. So what ends up happening is somebody goes through the protocol. Yeah. They do heavy loading of the body. They're adapting from a muscular standpoint, tendon, ligament standpoint, but they're still not growing any bone. They look in their pre and post DEXA scans. And so first couple times I saw this, I thought, well, how's your thyroid health? And never thought about it. Can you just ask your doctor if you can have your thyroid tested? And so sometimes the physician wouldn't even want to, oh, you don't need that. You don't have any of the symptoms. Well, can you just test it anyway? And 100% of the time that I asked that question, they had thyroid or parathyroid dysfunction. And then once that became controlled, either nutritionally or through pharmaceuticals, then they could begin to grow bone density. So that has been an issue.
Yeah, that's interesting. So would it be fair to say that everybody in this room, everybody out there watching who goes through a properly executed session multiple times is going to develop bone, but how their body, the ultimate result may be affected by something else, but absolutely everybody is going to gain bone, subject to some other potential.
No, because of like the thyroid dysfunction.
Well, but does the thyroid dysfunction keep the bone from?
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't let that.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They have they're very compromised in absorbing minerals in the bone. They have dysfunctional thyroid. But so then we start getting phone calls. This is like my test facility days. I get phone calls from these physicians. You've spotted thyroid dysfunction in 20 of my patients. This was the question. Really? Yeah. And 20 people who I never would have thought to say you need to have your thyroid tested. And I said, well, I don't know. Put that on the website. That's cool.
That's a long-term test.
Yeah. But ultimately, we're going to be better off now that they've addressed that issue. So
we saw that ourselves.
Right, and then once it gets controlled, then they can start growing bone density, and there are just different things that are happening in everybody's physiology,
lifestyle.
Yeah, and here's an example: bone density adaptations are localized; they're not systemic. So, like if you load the upper extremities and not the lower extremities, you're going to see bone density changes in the upper and not the lower. So you have to load the specific bone. So let's say somebody had an injury in an ankle, younger. Because of that, they're very apprehensive to load the lower extremities. They may have an adaptation in one place of the body and not in the other until they either biomechanically or even psychologically decide that, okay, I really need to get to the proper levels of force. So that is a issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, issue.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
I think, are there any final comments you want to make before we go to some questions on the phone? And then once we finish those questions, we'll come back here for live.
No, I enjoyed the format, though. This is nice. I like it.
Yeah, this was fun. Let's go to a question here. Another question in from Boise, Idaho. They wanted you to talk about why we have whole body vibration.
Does everybody know what whole body vibration is? No? Did I get it now? Okay.
Yeah. So
there is there's a device that's over there, and it's in all OsteoStrongs. Which so you do know what it is. Okay. So I'm just preaching to the choir here. So it makes the body slightly unstable. So there's movement up and down, side to side, forward and backward at 30 hertz. 30 times per second, there's a slight destabilization type stimulus. Forces the body to restabilize. So muscles get turned on. It's what's called a short-term potentiation. 87% of professional teams in the United States use this to activate. They call it movement preparation. So we're just doing the same thing here so that we're ready to engage to a very high degree when we get on the spectrum devices.
The Seahawks have this exact device that we've got here.
Yeah, side.
I do have a question.
Yes,
Jerry?
In your Meet the Inventor card, it says you talk a lot about osteoporosis. How about osteoarthritis? Can you expand on
Good
that?
question.
great question. So the question was, we talk a lot about osteoporosis. I don't know if that's true. I think we talk about bone health.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So we talk about bone health. And osteoarthritis, we talk about pain reduction. So I think a lot of people that have osteoarthritis don't call it osteoarthritis. They say, yeah, my hands hurt when I wake up. Like it just hurts to squeeze a fist. It hurts to open my car door. So we talk about joint pain reduction. Ultimately, they're the same subject. And like when someone's bone on bone and they have pain from that, they can influence via what we're doing here with osteogenic loading. They can increase the thickness of tendons and ligaments that surround that joint that's compromised and thereby offloading that joint slightly and really cutting back on the pain. So we have people who say it's painful. I can't walk downstairs. I have to sidestep when I walk downstairs. I feel like I should be in a wheelchair. They're looking at potential joint replacement, and after a few months here, they say, yeah, my knees still don't feel great, but I can do anything now. And so total quality of life.
So it's the ligaments and the tendons around the joint, not the cartilage itself.
So yeah, the cartilage cannot grow back. Once the cartilage is gone, it's gone. If you have some cartilage and you start to compress that existing cartilage to the degree we are, you can improve the quality of cartilage. And that was actually a recent discovery. That was a study by Coley, K-O-L-I, in 2017, where him and researchers determined that the density of cells increased, similar to that in the musculature and in the tendons and ligaments of the cartilage that was left over. So that was a pretty exciting advancement. That's all based on the impact level forces. So again, can't regrow cartilage, but you can support the joint much better, which manifests in a reduction of discomfort. Also can be seen through a reduction in inflammatory markers. So we see less inflammation in the body as a result. Yeah.
Let's take one more question over here before we end the broadcast. And then I'll talk a little bit about the broadcast.
Like you have somebody that's had a joint replacement. My mom's had 2 knees, left hip, right shoulder. Could she get benefit from that too?
So the question was multiple joint replacements. Can somebody have multiple joint replacements and use osteogenic loading with proficiency? So the answer is yes, and let me explain why. So when an artificial joint is implanted in the body, it attaches to bone, right? So if you talk to a surgeon, they'll frequently, when discussing bone density with an orthopedic surgeon, they'll talk about like what kind of wood they're screwing into, right? Like if you're going to build something, you don't want rotten wood, you want strong wood. So they want to attach to bone mass that's powerful. The problem is a lot of the people who need joint replacements have exactly the opposite of that. So what happens is first they'll recommend OsteoStrong for prehabilitation, prehab of a joint replacement. Increase the bone density. Most specifically, we increase trabecular bone more so than cortical bone. So the inside, the newer bone tissue, we have a much stronger influence on that than the older bone. The older bone is just kind of sitting there and providing structural rigidity. But of course, the new bone becomes the old bone at some point, so it all ends up working. But what we have with an implant, so you can just imagine the inside of the bone kind of looks like a honeycomb. So there's walls and then there's voids. And when you have an implant, it's ceramic or metal, it's attaching them. And these objects don't have flexibility to them. But your bone does have flexibility. I can show you loading shots, stop motion photography, where you can actually see someone's femur shortening for the brief 5 seconds that they do things. Right, so the bone's actually bending. It's pliable. I know you don't think about it that way, but it does have some flexibility to it. So the bone is moving, compressing, and that attachment point is not, which means you get accelerated bone growth around the attachment point, which can improve the integrity of the implant. And also keep in mind that joint replacements are built for high impact because they don't know what you do. And you know they want you to be able to jump out of an airplane if you want to. And you're not gonna, not that your mother's going to go do that, right? But the option is available. That's right. There's these joints. Joint replacement is the most powerful joint in the body.
Good.
But now we can influence how that attaches and even improve that attachment.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah. Cool, guys.
We're going to get ready to wrap up here because there are some centers watching from different time zones. So I know it's getting a little bit later for them. I want to thank everybody for watching online. I want to make sure everyone understands that if you are interested and you have not had a session or tried a session, that all participating OsteoStrong, which is mostly everybody, will offer you a free or complimentary trial session that's educational to let you come in and learn about it and experience it. And I recommend that you give that a shot. You can go out to OsteoStrong.me and you can even register online there, or you can look for your center and you can call them and ask for a complimentary educational session. Also, if you are watching because you're interested in investing or becoming a franchise owner, just go to the same website, OsteoStrong.me, and look for the franchising tab. We'll walk you through the process, tell you a little bit more about it, and you can submit a request for more information. So thank you, everybody that was watching from Australia, Rapid City, South Dakota, Boise, Idaho, Wenatchee, Washington. I know I'm missing a few other folks, but thank you for joining us this evening. And Dr. John.
Thanks.
Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.